Corsair's latest gaming keyboard is this, the K70 Pro TKL, and it's a rather unique take on a Hall effect keyboard. I should start off by making it clear that this is not entirely a Hall effect keyboard. These switches, admittedly the ones that you are more likely to want all of the fancy features to work on, are Corsair's MGX Hyperdrive magnetic pre-lubed switches. Whereas these, the arrow keys, function row, home and delete, all that sort of stuff, are actually Corsair's MLX Plasma linear mechanical pre-lubed switches. Yeah, Corsair opted to give you similar, but not identical feeling mechanical switches where you think you won't care to not have the fancy features, and only give you the good stuff in the middle. Interesting choice. I have to assume this is both for cost. Corsair ships millions, possibly billions of these red style switches versus tens to hundreds of thousands of these magnetic ones, so economies of scale are likely gonna save them a pretty penny here. And of course complexity, as the magnetic switches require a lot more than just an on-off signal sent to the microcontroller, which again adds complexity and therefore again adds cost. Now the magnetic switches themselves are actually pretty interesting. They do have the usual 0.1 to 4 millimeters of actuation distance with 4.1 millimeters of total travel, but interestingly, Corsair claims that they are the most accurate adjustable actuation point on the market, with the K70 Pro TKL switches only deviating by 0.18 millimeters maximum. At least when tested with their own limited range anyway. While the switches and IQ can do between 0.1 and 4 millimeters, Corsair recommends you only actually use 0.4 millimeters to 3.6 millimeters for the best accuracy. Unfortunately, I don't have any test equipment to see how the other HE boards that I've got can do compared to this one, but I've got some ideas for the peripheral testing latency tool for sure. Anyway, at least to my hands, these do feel really pretty nice. They're buttery smooth, obviously, and Corsair has upped the internal sound deadening to give it a more premium thok. Have a listen. The mechanical keys do feel different, although save for maybe the handful of arrow key gamers, I don't think the majority of people who buy this will really notice nor care much. It is pretty funny though. It's sort of like corporate penny pinching that I would expect from Corsair for sure. Of course, the magnetic switches do have a bunch of fancy features. The adjustable actuation point, as I've mentioned, is there, but also rapid trigger, which I think is just a straight rip of Razer's rapid trigger feature, which basically dynamically changes the actuation point, meaning if you lift off a little and then start to press it again, it moves the actuation point to a set distance under wherever you last left it, rather than at a fixed point in the travel. So no matter how far down the travel are, it's as quick and reactive as it can be, and makes it easier for you to strafe in games like CS2. Plus they have Flash Tap, which is an SOCD, that's simultaneous opposing cardinal directions feature, that sure sounds an awful lot like Razer's Snap Tap feature that I covered in my Huntsman V3 Pro TKL review, link in the cards above for that one. Basically, this lets you instantly snap from one direction to another, as the keyboard cuts the signal from an opposing key as soon as you start pressing one of those opposing keys. So if you're using, say, moving left with A, and then you start pressing D, it will cut the A signal even though you're still holding A down. Again, handy for movement-sensitive games like CS and Valorant. It's worth noting that that feature isn't available through IQ yet. You have to hit FN and right shift to enable it on the board itself, at least for now, and it's limited to A&D only with last priority mode only as well. Apparently, iCUE will add more configurability, but we'll have to wait until that's actually updated to find out what those options are going to be like. I must admit that Corsair's implementation of these HE features, especially in iCUE, is a little confusing and honestly a bit overwhelming. In theory, this can do multiple actions per keystroke, like a bunch of these HE boards can, but I couldn't exactly figure out how. In the actuation point settings, there is an option for dual actuation points, which I assume you set that up first, and then go to the key remapping section to actually set up multiple actions, but I mean, it looked more like regular remapping to me. There was an option for a second bit, but it didn't really make sense. It's all a little small and bereft of explanations or instructions for my smooth brain. I might have just missed the option amongst the litany of voice mod controls, something I don't even have installed, so why are all these options there if I can't use them? But the UI in general isn't as clear or as easy to use as I would personally like it to be. Let's get back to the board itself. It's a TKL layout with a couple of little additions, mostly at the top right. That'd be the rather nice clicky control dial, which, depending on your FN plus F12 mode, will either control system volume, keyboard backlight, brightness, vertical scrolling, horizontal scrolling, or zoom. It does have a nice click to it, although they have committed the cardinal sin of knobs on keyboards. There really isn't enough room to grip and twist your knob. That's a problem. It is quite nicely knurled though. Next to the much less humorously named control dial are the game mode and customized media buttons. The game mode locks the RGB to a set color, enables rapid trigger, locks the Windows key, and enables, or at least prefers, up to the 8000 Hz polling rate. Apparently in the next version of iCUE, you will be able to customize more of that game mode and its settings, as currently things like the actuation point are fixed at 1mm and 0.1mm for rapid trigger, and flash tap isn't even available, but it will apparently be later. As for that media button, it's customizable. By default, it's set to play pause. It's worth adding that the board does come with a fairly nice, lightly magnetic wrist rest. It's nice enough, a sort of little bit of padding, decently sort of feeling fabric on top. No big deal. Nice that it's included. As for the board itself, that has a brushed aluminium sort of faceplate or base plate with a nice plastic shell with integrated fully rubber feet. So whether it's flat or tilted up, you've got pretty good grip on the desk. The board itself has a detachable USB-C cable with the port itself up the top left, and the cable being a fairly basic rubber affair. Nothing too special there. It does retain kinks from the box quite considerably, but at least it's long enough. And of course, being Corsair, has the trademark RGB all the things. As you might expect, I did use my open source latency testing tool, available at osrtt.com, linked in the description if you want one, to test the latency. And unsurprisingly, especially 8000 Hz, it's pretty fast. With the actuation point set at the default 2mm, this took around 5.5 milliseconds to register a key press. Although it is worth noting that, as you can see from the pretty wild variations in the graph, it really depends on how hard and fast you're hitting it to change that latency figure quite a bit. With the game mode enabled, which sets the actuation point to 1mm, you get much more consistent and faster results. That averaged at 4.5 milliseconds, a full millisecond faster, and on par with the Newfie Air 60HE that I reviewed recently too, which is equally an 8 kHz Hall effect keyboard, with 1.2mm of default actuation point travel, so fairly similar. As for actually gaming on it, well, obviously that's a pretty good time. The smooth linear switches with that rapid trigger mode make it feel snappy and responsive, and very much puts you at a sort of competitive advantage, especially in those movement sensitive games for sure. As with all good tech, it becomes clear that you are the bottleneck, not the tech, which I suppose is exactly what you're looking for. I do like the sound, although the Air 60HE definitely has that pipped, although honestly, rather surprisingly for Corsair, this thing isn't £1 million. It's £170 in the UK, or either $180 or $190 in the US, depending on if you opt for the PBT double shot keycaps or not. An option that surprisingly isn't available in Europe, or is available in Europe but isn't available in the UK, Nordics, or Canada. So there you go. Overall then, the K70 Pro TKL is definitely an interesting choice. It's still considerably more expensive than the more sort of indie brands by comparison, something like the Newfie R60 HE, which I do appreciate is sort of in a bit of a different class and category, so it's not a super fair comparison, but still, that's more like £100 for an 8 kHz highly customizable HE board, versus this thing being a lot closer to 200, but compared to Razer's TKL HE board, I mean, this looks like an absolute bargain. And it has a nicer typing feel and sound, at least in my opinion. Although at least on the Razer board, all of the keys are actually magnetic ones, so there you go. The UI definitely needs some work to make it more user-friendly, and I mean, half of the features aren't even here yet, or at least properly anyway, so it's hard to render a final verdict if the board is scheduled to change, and especially so close to launch. Like, these updates are meant to come in November. Like, why not just wait a few more weeks until you've got everything ready? Black Friday, I guess, but anyway, it's a decent board with a definitive corporate feel. It's a good choice in an already crowded market, and if you want one, I'll leave a link to it in the description for you if you want to check it out. Of course, those are my thoughts, but I'd love to hear yours in the comments down below. What do you think of the K70 Pro TKL? Is this a board for you? Would you rather Razer's one, or something from a slightly smaller brand like Wooting or Newfie, or any of the other HE boards? Glorious as well. In fact, I actually have a Glorious board coming, so it'll be interesting to check that out too. And yeah, otherwise, like I said, there's a link in the description if you're interested. If you want to check out my own open source hardware, especially to test peripherals like this, you can check that out at the link in the description as well. And if you want to see more videos like this one, you can hit the subscribe button, check out plenty of more videos and end cards, including the Newfie and Razer videos. And otherwise, thanks for watching, hope you enjoyed it, we'll see you all in the next video.